and welcome to my channel. Today I will be showing you how to make a We the People tumbler. It's fairly easy, great for beginners, and a big seller. So follow along and feel free to ask any questions and make sure you subscribe. Thank you. So I started off basing my tumbler with white flat spray paint. And then I took a royal blue color and did a square in the top. Then I took red and sprayed around it. And then I took the blue again if needed to spray back. And basically went back and forth until I got the desired look, which is a blue square and the rest of it red. After that, I epoxied the tumbler. I used about 20 milliliters. This is a 30-ounce Yeti that I got from my dad. Typically I don't sell Yetis, but this is what I was using at the time. Once I epoxied and it cured, I cut my stars out that I got a file from off of Etsy, which I can link below. I did struggle with the stars a little bit. I started laying it down incorrectly, which then in turn made it lay down incorrectly throughout, which is okay. Although after all was said and done, I realized the stars were upside down. So just take your time, be patient, pay attention to what you're doing. Unlike me, who was just kind of rushing, as this is a very late birthday present for my dad. But once I was able to peel it up, everything seemed fine. I recommend putting a layer of epoxy in between your spray paint and your decal so that when you lift up your transfer tape, it does not pull at your spray paint. So this is another file I got off of Etsy. I'll link below. I cut out the main parts that I needed. The file came with the stars and the circle thing. I did not use that, so I just put it aside. While cutting is great, you're gonna need to rip the pages, which you'll see here, because that's what will make the edges burn better. So I ripped out what I needed in the size that I wanted. So obviously you can make bigger or smaller strips as you prefer. This is just what I preferred. So just rip all the papers, and once you're done with that, then you'll start burning the edges. So to burn the edges, you're going to need a lighter. I recommend making sure that there's nothing flammable around you. This will smell, so don't do this near your smoke detector. You could do it outside. On this particular day, it was a little bit windy, so it would have been hard. Everything would have been flying everywhere. But what I did is I start with the frayed edges, which is the edges that I tore, and I just lightly, one little section at a time, brought the lighter across it. If you do too big of a section, it could become dangerous because obviously the whole paper can catch on fire, and if you don't have anything immediately to put it out, I had a tub of water next to me as well as a fire extinguisher in the next room if I needed it. But other than that, I used my bare hands to put out the little flames, which is probably not recommended, but it really didn't burn for me, so it didn't matter. I noticed that all the edges on the side aren't frayed because I cut them, so I went ahead and ripped off as much as I could so that I could burn again. And you can burn all the pieces. You actually won't end up using all of the pieces for your tumbler because you're not going to need the entire sheet. I would just set them aside for the next one if you get another order. But the burning part's fairly easy. The image already came looking kind of a sepia look or old look, which is great because then you don't have to dye the paper or go that extra step. It's already done for you. But the burning part, I think, really adds something to the tumbler, so I highly recommend doing that. So the next couple minutes, you'll just see me burning and ripping, and then we'll move on to the next part. So once you're done with all your pieces, or the pieces that you at least need, you're going to then Mod Podge it on your tumbler. So when you print out this image, which I should have mentioned before, you're going to print it out on copy paper, literally just regular paper. You don't need cardstock, you don't need anything fancy. I'm sure that there are other ways to do this. I just figured that this was the easiest way. So originally I started just Mod Podging straight onto the tumbler and then laying the paper. But what I found easier later on was actually Mod Podging the paper itself and then laying it down. What also helps is when you plan to lay out what piece of paper you want where. So I knew I wanted the We the People part to be towards the front under the stars. So I knew that I wouldn't lay that down first. This piece that I'm working on currently did need to be cut a little bit shorter as it meets with the stars on the other side. So I ripped it and then burned that edge. I also figured that that was a big blank space up top, so I wanted to add a piece of paper up there. So I had already measured out with another piece of paper. It was actually the end of the one that I had already cut, and laid it up there. Once you lay down a piece, you're going to want to Mod Podge over top of it so it can all start drying as soon as possible. And then you're just going to lay the paper across all of the tumbler and Mod Podge at least 1 to 2 layers over top. I didn't want to do too much. You're also going to want to be careful, as sometimes, since it is copy paper, it can rip a little bit with the Mod Podge because it is becoming moist. But other than that, after you Mod Podge, you're going to want to wait about, I don't know, like a half an hour, maybe to an hour. Make sure it's all completely dry. And what you're not going to see next is me epoxying over this again. So you're going to want to epoxy it before you start distressing it. And then we'll go from there. Also, as you start laying this down, the paper is going to get a little wrinkly, and that's okay because that's the point of the look. If you don't like that, I would recommend not using a curvy tumbler. I would use a straight tumbler. It might make it a little bit easier. You can change this design. So you can do the whole top stars. You could do, instead of a diagonal, you could do straight lines. It's really your design. It's up to you. The basics are just, Mod Podging the paper on, sealing it with the Mod Podge once it's laid on there, and making sure it's secure and exactly how you want it to be. So next we're going to distress. I use sepia alcohol ink. It's Tim Holtz, I'm pretty sure. Poured it into a cup, and I used about like a 2-inch brush. Dipped it in there dry, and just started going for it on the tumbler. I went in a downward motion. I thought that would work best. You could also go diagonal with the way that your Constitution or We the People stripes are going. But I just went up and down, and this is again your preference. You could do it lightly. I really wanted a distressed tumbler. I didn't want my stars to be white. I wanted them to be off-white, since I didn't have that color vinyl when I put it on. And I just did it throughout the whole tumbler. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and then you'll be able to see the end result. Also, if you get alcohol ink in a spot, or you don't like the way that the alcohol ink is laying down, just use alcohol. It'll help spread it around a little more, or you can put alcohol on a cotton round and literally wipe it off and it'll be fine. So once you're done distressing your tumbler with alcohol ink, which you can also use, I forgot to mention, any color brown or black that you see fit for your design. I just chose to use sepia because that's what I had on hand. Once you're done, you're going to go ahead and epoxy it. I epoxied with approximately 30 milliliters. This was my final coat. I didn't need another one after this, and it was complete. And then I let it sit overnight for about 12 hours, cleaned up the rim. Before you ship it, you usually want to wait 72 hours, but this was going to my dad, so he'll get it sometime this week. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I appreciate your support.